Hey everybody, I'm Randy Wolfe, and today I'm talking about the pros and the cons of owning real estate. There are pros and there are cons, and so often we hear more about the pros, but I'm going to dive into both pros and cons today. So before I do that, though, I just want to say, real estate is an incredible way that you can build and grow your wealth. I have actually something that I wanted to tell everyone about. I've got a free guide that I'm giving away. I put a lot of time into this guide, and basically this guide explains exactly the strategy that I ended up using when I started investing in real estate to scale my portfolio over the years to a pretty great portfolio size. So at this point, if you're interested in that, you'd like to get that, I'll give it to you for absolutely free. You can comment below the word wealth, and I'll get you a copy of that free guide. But on to rental property pros and cons. So we talk a lot on this channel about all the cool stuff when it comes to rental properties. I talk a lot about the tax benefits. I talk a lot about, building wealth and all those things. But what about the cons? So first and foremost, and again, I did say I would talk about pros. So again, tax benefits, passive income, debt pay down, appreciation, those are the things. And again, I talk a lot about on the channel, so I'm not going to spend as much time on that. But the cons of it is this. So first of all, if you self-manage a property, you are going to get phone calls. And you're not going to always get the theoretical phone call in the middle of the night, but you do get a lot of phone calls. You have tenants that have problems. And I will say it's kind of surprising how often things break in rental properties. Like, for example, you think about your own house. If you own a home, things don't break nearly as much as you're in your own home. But the reason is obviously rental properties, people don't take care of a rental property typically like they would their own home. So that's one thing. Also, too, as a landlord, sometimes landlords have the tendency to put in cheap stuff. So like, for example, when we think about a sink, the fixtures of a sink, putting in cheap hardware and stuff that break down faster because they're wanting to save some money, which inevitably in the long run, that could potentially cost them more money. So you're going to have things that break down, and you're going to get calls, and you're going to get, I think my thing that I dislike the most is being interrupted. If I'm in deep work and then there's some sort of interruption, that sort of throws me out of my game, so to speak. And I have to stop high level thinking and go into this, problem solving, day-to-day operational stuff. So that's one disadvantage if you self-manage your properties. If you hire a property manager, which I would say hiring a property manager is probably a really good idea to do that. I think it's important to consider self-managing your property in the beginning if you're able to. Now, some people can't because of time and job and all that, but I think it's a good idea so that you kind of learn the ropes, but eventually get a property manager or, bring someone in-house to manage properties. But still, guess what? Even when you have a property manager, you still, in essence, have to sometimes manage the manager. And you still are going to be involved in some of the decision-making processes, ultimately, until you really get your SOPs dialed in. SOPs meaning standard operating procedures. It takes time. Things pop. Random stuff happens. I mean, until you have your first pipe freeze up and burst, you might not necessarily be thinking about that. You may be thinking about, what to do when the, refrigerator goes out, but then all of a sudden you're like, oh man, I didn't even think about it's getting cold now, and I bought these properties in the summer, or bought this property in the summer, haven't even thought about wintertime. And so stuff kind of happens. You kind of learn, you add that to your SOPs. And so your SOPs is something that's going to evolve over time, and eventually you'll get better and better with those. But it's a lot of the headaches of dealing with that. So I think that's probably dealing with problems as far as with property breakdown is number one. Managing your property manager, that's number two. There's also, if you have just dealing with tenants and issues with tenants. So for example, I talk about the property itself breaking down, but then there's situations where tenants, you hopefully will have good tenants. You'll do a good job screening tenants, but inevitably you're going to get a bad tenant. And when this happens, this can be a variety of different things. Number one, it could be a tenant that's disruptive. They're causing problems, and let's say you have a small multifamily and they're causing problems with people in the other units because they're being loud, or maybe you just have a house and they're in a neighborhood and they're causing problems and the cops are getting called and all this stuff. We've had all sorts of weird situations happen. Had someone with a dog get out and it was causing problems. Like all these different weird things come up. And so dealing with people, you're going to have these problems. And even if you have a property manager, sometimes this stuff can be kind of a headache. And so you have to understand that there's that. You're going to have tenants that don't pay rent. And then inevitably, it was a good while before I ever had to evict anybody. But eventually, you're probably going to go through an eviction, and that's not fun. And it's not that serious. Once you go through the process, you're like, oh, that really wasn't that serious. But your first one is a little scary. You're kind of like, oh man, this is like a legal thing and all that. But ultimately, if you screen properly, hopefully you can minimize that. I've had to do very, very few evictions, but I always feel bad about it, even though when it's not my fault or anything. They're just not doing something they're not supposed. They're doing something they're not supposed to, or they just stop paying rent and don't communicate, that sort of thing. It still feels bad. And so there's that. Then there's the whole situation with managing things like contractors. So when things break and you have to get contractors to go out and do and fix the work, that's going to be something that's always some challenges there until you kind of really get a good team of contractors. You're always wondering, are they going to overcharge you? Sometimes if you have a property manager, they're not really on top of that stuff as much because they're not paying the bill, you are. And so they may send someone out there that's convenient for them to just make a quick phone call to, but they're overcharging you. So that's one of the disadvantages there that you have to deal with, particularly if you have a property manager, is make sure they're getting good pricing, not just someone that they like and it's convenient for them, but like they're monitoring the prices that they're charging. So that's something, but also too, the contractors doing the work that they do. If you send someone out there and they don't do a good job, and or they're hard to get a hold of and show up, and coordinating all those things, that can be a real hassle. And so I think like those are some of the things that you have to be aware of. You can minimize a lot of these things by taking proactive steps that I mentioned, like screening tenants, screening property managers, building out a contractor list, having really, really dialed in SOPs. Like those are all of the things that you can do to sort of mitigate a lot of these cons that I'm talking about when it comes to owning rental properties. But at the end of the day, you're still going to run into some of that stuff. Now, the flip side, and I'll be brief with this, is all of the advantages you get. So you've got literally an asset that is appreciating in most situations. It's appreciating in value. If you have debt on it, the tenant is paying down that debt that you're now, the debt's getting paid down. So you're controlling an asset with a very small amount of money in relationship to what the asset's worth. So your equity is continuing to grow and grow, which is your net worth. You've got a lot of great tax advantages that you're able to leverage. You have different strategies, as I mentioned earlier, the BRRRR strategy, things that you can do to where you can actually scale up your portfolio and things of that nature, your wealth. And so those are, I think, the advantages for me outweigh the disadvantages. The pros outweigh the cons. But anyway, I hope this has been helpful. If you are interested in learning more about real estate investing, if you're a new or aspiring real estate investor and you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Also, too, I am excited to announce I'm going to be rolling out a 90-day coaching program that is on the horizon here. I have the private community, but that community is currently full. We're not accepting any new community members right now. However, the 90-day coaching program that I'm rolling out, that automatically gets you into the community. So I will be putting out more information in the future about that. If you're watching this video in the future, there may be something in the description below, a link on how you can apply to see if you can get into that 90-day program. But yeah, if you have any interest in that, check it out. And as always, I look forward to catching you on the next video.